And my argument was that without giving the people accessibility to resources, knowledge, and permissions, we could never have sustainability. And my argument was that our current systems, whether capitalist, socialist, neoliberal, whatever, will lead us to polluted environment. There's no way out. That was my argument. And I proposed giving free access to people. And today I will continue with that concept is out of this concept. And this concept basically was published in 1986. At that time, John Abraka, my advisor, said, Jamil, nobody will care about this one. 30 years later, they may look at it. He was right. Now, in the last 3-4 years, people started to quote the book, refer to the book. The reason is that with neoliberalism and Thatcherism, Reaganism, and the effect of that on the business market was so powerful that nobody cared to look at any other paradigm. The title of the book was Crisis in the Built Environment. Now, if you know the work of Thomas Kuhn, he is a famous epistemology. He wrote a book about the structure of scientific revolution, and he was arguing that knowledge does not progress as we thought usually, gradually. Science has its day end, science sometimes does not proceed, sometimes. And he divided the stages of progress into 4. There is a paradigm, and that paradigm cannot explain some phenomena. So there is anomalies. And those anomalies start more and more in number. Then there is a crisis among scientists. They're looking for a new paradigm. They start looking at new paradigm. That's why I named my book at that time Crisis in the Built Environment. The case of the Muslim city. And it was discussing the Muslim city, but the concept was what I meant is on our larger context that the profession of artificial and planning is in crisis. Simply because the existing paradigm of economy was much controlled by central authorities, and that we needed some way out of this dead end. So we need a new paradigm. So we should suggest new paradigms to come out of this crisis. Now, I showed this yesterday, but I repeat it again for our audience, because it is important that if we professionals like the traditional built environments, by the way, yesterday we went to the center of Stockholm and we saw the tissue and the fabric, quite similar to most other traditional cities. You feel decisions are not centrally taken, maybe by the people. But anyhow, if we like that environment, like the center of Stockholm or the center of any old city, we like it, then we copy elements from it, and we, through a filter that we create as professionals, either it passes or it does not. But this forms that we like is the product, the product of human property rights, human rights, social relationships, economic situations that are so much different than ours today. Now, if those forces interacted and generated through a certain process these products, then if we like these products, does it make sense to copy these products and bring them here to our times? We need to look at the process. And that's what I will do today in the built environment. Yesterday it was in the economy, today it's in the built environment. My argument is that always the built environment is far more complicated than when a planner can understand. Planners, architects, It's very difficult for them, special planners, to understand the built environment. There's no way they can do that. I'll give one example now about the difficulty of that. But architects, they do well usually because in the capitalist system, they are given a piece of land with a budget and so on and invent the best possible building for that site. With planning, it's different. You have the city, you have interaction of all types of humans, companies, corporations. They are all having their own interests, conflicts of interests. So planning has a major role in shaping our life. Unfortunately, I always feel planners fail to do that. Now let me give an example. If a village, this is a house, street, and square in the middle maybe. If a village were given 100 trees, how would they distribute that? If they agreed to make it in the streets, it will have different consequences than if they agreed to put it inside their houses. If they agreed, or somebody forced them to do that, to put it in the streets, maybe the people will not be much interested in taking care of the plants, right? Maybe a company will be assigned to irrigate the trees and to reap the fruits and whatever. But here, inside the dwellings, the people has to take care of the trees. So we might expect the people's knowledge of irrigation and taking care of the trees will be enhanced. And it's not for a specific group of people as in this case. Here in this case where the people may decide to put it in the public and in the private, we would expect different consequences. Because here in this case maybe the ruler of the city or the mayor, he say, well, it costs money to maintain these trees. I should take money from you for these services. Here in this case, it won't cost the public, but it will cost the people. But some people might be careless about trees because they don't like trees. So the village may lose some good trees. But here, we can always penalize the company if it did not do it. In this case, people may say, well, I don't want to plant my share of trees in the street, but I'll make it inside my dwelling so I don't pay tax. Or I'll pay some tax for if I put it in the street, but I'd rather put it in my outdoor next to the, I'll take care of it. So it's public and now visually, in each case there is consequences. Here you see nice streets, you don't see streets, here you see somewhere in between. Socially it has also consequences. Here in this case, people may be drawn to go to the outside, sit under the trees. Children may gather here and they may play, but here there is no better places. If it's sunny, if it's hot, for example. Here in this case, the people may sit under the trees in the outside of each dwelling. Then they may talk to each other, they may enhance their relationships with each other. Here in this case, they may visit each other and they sit in their courtyards or inside their dwellings under the trees. So the gathering spaces will be affected in each time. So this is one example, a tree. Imagine how is the built environment composed of what? Traffic lights, pavements, shops, gas stations, metro stations, bus stations, malls. Every decision will affect everything. You build a hospital somewhere, gradually around it, pharmacies will come, and so on. Let's review some examples about the tree. Now, Here from Turkey, Istanbul, you notice that there is no trees in the street. Because the people are the ones who are maintaining the trees, so they put it inside. So you notice that clearly in the Muslim city, that it's always, often, I don't say always, inside the dwelling. But the street has little trees. Again, this is from North Africa. All the trees are inside. Now, this is the French colonization of Tunis. They put all the trees were in the street. This is North Africa again. Gaza, Marrakesh, and so on. See? No trees. The trees are inside. And the courtyard is quite lavish. So you feel that the investment of the society is mostly on the private spaces, not the outside spaces. Once I went from Dhaka airport to the city, where the highway is quite nicely paved with columns of lights. Each column would house maybe hundreds of people. And there is poverty. Casablanca. With the colonization, the elements started to be drawn into the public space. Now, what is the importance of where the element is? Is it in the public, or is it in your house, or is it? That affects the initiative of people. How do they deal with the elements? For example, this is a tree in the public space. It has to be irrigated. A company was hired to irrigate the tree. This guy, small tree with heavy water, because he has to do them one after the other. For him, it is a task that he has to finish. It is a boring task. But if the tree is inside your house, it's different. You will take care of it, you pour the water neatly, nicely. After he left, this is a hole. And believe me, this tree did not live. It died. Now this is a mosque. This is the Imam of the mosque. Should be a religious person, should be a very, very nice person. He's a nice. But what happened? Because the rag from prayer will be moved every day, he just nailed it to the floor. It is not his. The rag is not his. But he has control over that. Here is in Tunis, I guess. The guys who are working maintenance here, they want to make coffee. They made a small fire. The fate of this object is not their interest. Their interest is to make coffee and finish their job. But if this thing was inside someone's house, they will not allow them to do that. But now, because it's in the public domain, everybody says, well, okay. Somebody, some official will come to take care of the subject. This is in Egypt. He was painting the window panel, but he did not paint this part, because this belongs to the public. But if you were the owner of this and you hired him to paint this, you will ask him to clean this window first and then paint it nicely. And this is in King Faisal University where I taught. They are moving the chairs and desks from one building to another. Nicely, well-designed chairs and desks. They just put them on top of each other, move one place to another. They don't want it. Now this is in the hotel where I'm staying. I thought I'll give you an example from Sweden. From this area, air comes out. Comes in, sorry. Freezing air. I told the management, please seal it. Not because of me, because you lose energy. She said, okay. Now, 1.5 day, nothing happened. Now, if the worker owns the hotel, in order not to lose money, immediately she will act to repair the damage. Not only that, but I found it strange, I don't know completely much like you do, that there is no opening here. It seems that the hotel is owned by an agent, managed by another agent, and so the profit is somehow lost in between. So when the carpenter did this for this, the heating, it's quite hot, but the room is a bit cold. Why? Because the heating is heating the wall. If there is opening here, there will be air circulation. And this is a must in heating. That's what I know about heating, but I'm not expert. You should have an air movement. Now, there is basic human tendencies. Like people like to expand their territories. They don't want others to intervene in their business. They like to express their values on what they own, use, share, whatever. That affects, health-wise, the location of the object. I'll explain that. Here, a person in Type City built a staircase in the air, hoping that one day he will have a second floor. He's already planning it. Here in Tunis, in Morocco, they expanded their dead-end street. They took part of the dead-end street. Here in this case, in Tunis, this guy managed to expand his property, but because the residents in the street, they don't have power, they don't have control. In the past, they did have power, they did have control. Now the state assumed control, but the state is not there. Or maybe he is a powerful guy. So imagine there was an arch. He destroyed the arch and expanded his property. And it is almost 1 meter square wide. This is in Cairo. The owner is not there. The roof became garbage location. So if you like, there is very clear connection between the location of elements and behavior of people toward the health of that object. This is from Riyadh. The dead street was taken. This is from, I think, Egypt, where the poor people. Let's remember one thing. Yesterday, I concentrated on always remember that people are poor. So we don't judge the quality of the built environment by the poorness of the people. Now here is gathered almost everything that can be thrown away and he made a house of it. This is a collection of, I don't say garbage, but things that cannot be used by anyone. So he is quite inventive in making a house out of it. People like to change things, expand things. This is famous project in Iraq. Look what happened. This is how it was built, designed and built. Now it's built.
Where is it?
Morocco. This is in Malacca in Malaysia. I think this was built by the Chinese. There is an alleyway here. Then they closed it and they expanded their shops gradually to take the passageway. So the size of the street became narrow. The width of the street became narrow. This is from Jeddah. The rules does not allow a person to make a sidewalk or pavements. Why? Because the street is very narrow. This guy violated the rules. At night he made small, not sidewalk, but space for trees. Now, if he managed to do this and he got away with it, the neighbors will do the same. People learn from each other. This is only normal. Here in this case, for example, a car hit this wall, this guy invented this method of protecting his wall, and another guy did the same on the opposite side. Now, my task so far was I tried to convince you that the location of the object will affect the condition of objects. And that will affect everything, social, economic, and so on. Now, assume for a minute, I know it's crazy, but assume for a minute that the built environment will talk. What it will say. If a child came here with one of you and he started playing around and he went over the chair and he started jumping up and down, what would the chair say? Does the chair say, well, there is Swedish or Egyptian or American child jumping on me? Or will it say, I am damaged? Do something with this kid, right? The chair, the sofa in the hotel, the same. If you ask let's say, a car, how are you treated? What would it say? I'm used by the police force every day, driving someone else, and I might live maybe 3-4 years and I'll be replaced. But if the same car was given to a guy who bought it with a loan from the bank and he has to pay for it, and he will watch it from flies, not to land on it. He cares about it because it's his. So if you make a simple exercise, what will happen to the built environment? If it talks, we will come up with the conclusion that it only cares, objects only cares about how they were treated. And treatment, how they were treated, can be classified into 3 claims. If you are owner, you will care about things that you own more other people. Friedman, economist, he has famous quote that he says, the best dollar is the one that you spend on yourself, because you buy the highest quality thing for the cheapest possible price. Then someone else's dollar on you. And then your dollar that you spend on someone else. We just want to give you the money, so it's number one, and he has to choose. The worst situation is you spending someone else on someone else. So ownership is very important in deciding the caring of people of things. Another thing, another claim is control. Behavior of people noticeably will change with control. Now, a mayor who does not own the city has certain control over certain objects. By the way, I will leave you all the presentations. The mayor does not own, but he may have the power, if he did some lobbying, closing some streets, opening some streets, giving some people the right to park, giving some shops the right to park outside their shops. Of course, there is reason for that. You cannot act without reason, but reason can always be played around with. Examples of control: the state in the Ottoman Empire controlled the lands, maybe of its that is used by other people maybe. We in this place, we use this space, right? Do we own it? Do we control it? No. So we here as users, as one group, as users, use this room. So if you like, we have ownership, control, and use. We have three distinct claims that we can observe in the built environment. A chair in the public is used by who? By the public. As one party. I'm moving to another concept. The first concept is that we have three claims that would decide the fate of objects. Ownership, control, use. I want you to think now, if you are Popperian, you know Karl Popper, he says the best method of advancing knowledge is through conjecture, you make a theory, and for others to refute that theory. A theory that's not refutable does not add up to knowledge. A theory that's refutable, if it's refuted, we know what's wrong with it, and we can go ahead. Or it will stand for a while till it will be refuted someday, but it still then will explain a lot of things. Now here I don't say theory, but a proposal that only three claims affect the condition of objects. You have to challenge me and say, no, there is fourth one. Or say, no, it's only two. Or you argue with me, no, I don't think that the condition of objects are important. Now, each claim, ownership, control, or use, my argument is that can only be enjoyed by one party. Party like a football team, they have one goal, beating the other side. We as group are one party using this space. The faculty in his room is a party. So the party can be one person, a child who inherited, okay? Or it could be the state, who owns, let's say, a museum. So ownership can be enjoyed by one person, two person, three person. At the end, it is, or they are one party. The same goes for control. It is always one party. The decision of selling this property or not, or dividing it into two buildings, is one decision. Should we divide this building or not? Should we close this street or not? It is always one decision. The same goes for use. There is only one party are using, but that party can be the public when they use the public chair, or it could be a student who's using the institute chair. Now we have two concepts, the parties and the claims. Let's put them together. We'll have 5 conditions or 5 situations. The first I call the unified form of submission. Why unified form of submission? Because the object is under the control, use, and ownership of those parties. The object has nothing to say. He has to surrender. He has to submit. So here, who can give an example of an object that you own, control, and use?
Shoe. My shoe.
Exactly. My flash, our glasses. It's not only personal thing. The apartment that you live in, if you own it, okay? How about the public spaces in the apartment? You know, the condominiums are property that owned by different people, each one in his own apartment, right? So the shared spaces, the elevators, the stairs, who own them? The residents collectively make one party that own, control, use this public space. Now, if the residents of this building have rules from the government, you can do this, you cannot do that, then do the people control the space? We say the controlling party is composed from the residents plus the state. So it is not in the unified form of submission. It's something else. The residents own and use, but another party, the government with the people, are in control. So it is like a trusteeship. So when you introduce laws and rules, you move the object, you move the space, the building from the unified form of submission to another form. Here I call the dispersed form of submission. One party owns, one controls, one uses. A good example is public properties, housing projects, owned by the government, controlled by the state or the housing agency, and used by the people. So that's why it is often in dispersed situation, in bad situation. You cannot compare at all an object in this level with an object in this level. That's almost impossible. Because it's always very good in this position, it's always bad in this position. You will have a lot of questions, I will answer that. Yeah. You can see that in your faces. But here, some scholars will get mad at me. And they say, well, the Waqf institution in the Muslim world, like hospitals, are in this form of submission. A man, before he dies, he needs a lot of money to build hospital for the use of the public. So the ownership, if you like, is freezed or by God. Who controls it? The trustee of the property and the public use it. Sick people or the elderly people. Now my answer to that is, although this is quite bad, but in the Muslim city, because there was no government taking care of these activities, and because the wealth is somehow, like we saw yesterday, quite even distributed, the people were rich, they donated money, so most public services was taken by this form of submission. Although it's not that great, but it's much, much better than the government taking responsibility. Because there corruption involved, might be involved. In these cases, no. Because the people, the users have some say against the trustee party. Now, this form of submission is quite well known and most of us live in it. I call it permissive form of submission, like the apartment that you live in. If you rent that apartment, you only use it, the owner, the investor, control it and own it, right? In this case, we expect the relationship between the two parties will be one of agreement. The owner needs your money, or he will agree with you, and you agree with him. So the relationship is one of agreement. Here, there is no relationship. The relationship of the party is with the outside world. Inside is treated with different roles. Here in this case, we have a bit different situation because we have three parties. Like the Ministry of Housing, dealing with the government, with the parliament, with whatever. With other agents who are on the side to take care of the properties, with the users. So it's a bit complicated. So here we should expect a lot of bureaucracy. Here there is no bureaucracy. So if the environment is mostly composed of this, it might be a healthier environment. Here in this case, the possessive form of submission, I called it, usually control is always with the owner. Right? For some reason, control shifted to the user. And it is not very common situation. And if spreads in the environment, it may not be very, very healthy. And I always argue that this form of submission was the one of the causes, major causes of the fall of the Ottoman Empire was in the legal system in Islam. The person who revives a piece of land owns it. Except one school of law said, no, it might not be possible because people may fight over a piece of land, so by the permission of the state. So lately at the Ottoman Empire, in the last 50, 60 years, they needed more money. So they said, all your properties that were revived without the permission of the authority is the ownership of the state. So they levied taxes on the people. So the people has to pay more taxes. They lost interest. The income diminished, and gradually the situation became like a socialist organization where the income goes down each year. So this is the possessive form of submission. In our daily life, maybe you see this in the Middle East in the markets, where the people possess certain space. In that space, they sell goods. So they control that space, and they use it. Do they own it? No, they don't own it. And if you think of in the built environment of all these combinations, the 5 combinations, you start seeing things, I hope, differently. For example, Bangladesh is at that time, now I think the economic situation is much better, in 1985. You see in this picture, a guy is urinating in the street. It is public domain. The authority is weak. They don't have enough power to control. And they took control from the people. While here in a village, in the same country, the people are in control. And look how clean it is. Here, it's not clean. This is a guy who owns a small boat. When I want to ride, he said, take your shoes off. Can you imagine how he's so careful about his life investment? So this should live longer. I said, okay, I'll take it. Can I take a picture? Here in this case, they want to repaint the cover of the manhole. You see how it's painted? Because it is done by a company. If the person wants to paint this, he will take it out neatly, paint it. After it dries, he will take it. But this guy just, no, it will be difficult to open this because the paint will work as adhesive. This is in Saudi Arabia where boys were given the permission to use this land as football. Imagine they worked very hard because it is in their own interest to create this football space. Here is Afghanistan. Every corner, although they are poor, is quite well thought of in terms of utilizing the space and the objects. Now, let me ask a question. I said the unified form of submission is always the best. And the dispersed form of submission is always the worst. Let's say that there is an apartment building and there is 2 apartments, one on top of each other. One is all controlled and used by, let's say, 10 people, 10 young people who are careless, who are unhappy, who were poor. And the other one, in the dispersed form, there is a nurse, nice, clean lady nurse. Which property would be better?
The dispersed.
Hmm?
The dispersed.
The dispersed. So this is against what I'm saying. Right? Be careful. I'm not saying the unified form of all objects are better. What I'm saying is that this property that has one lady that is very neat, it is in the dispersed. If we move it to the unified, it will be even much better. Let's not compare both. And the property that is owned by the 10 people in the unified, they own it, use it, control it. If we make it in other form, if we move it to the dispersed, it will be even much worse. And this is the strength of the model. That the argument is always push properties toward the unified form of submission. And believe it or not, the whole traditional environments in most places, to some extent, were in the unified form of submission. This is from Spain, dead-end streets, neatly, clearly organized. This is from Tehran. Housing project, how much they spend on it, but it is in the dispersed form of submission. This one, unified form of submission. Squatter settlements, the people took what's left from others and they made settlement out of it. Even the site is terrible. It is in a valley, side of a valley. The site is terrible. The materials are terrible and they are very poor. And they managed to do something out of it that sometimes you wonder how they managed to do that. Look at this entrance. He gathered ceramics from everywhere. It looks shanty from outside, but when it rains, water is taken care of. This is waterway. Look at the living room. One of the neatest, cleanest living room I saw. Although they are very poor. Look at the floors here. He collected things from everywhere to make this house. This is normal. This is in Malaysia. See the tiles from here and there. So the argument is not for this country or that country. It's universal. I'm sure you guys from Latin America, if you go and look at the environment from this perspective, you'll find hundreds, thousands of examples. This is, I think, in Singapore or Malaysia. This is India. This is Egypt. This is Egypt. Public housing. This is Saudi Arabia. A guy who made a house out of nothing. So, although he's poor, because he worked hard to build himself without corruption, without thieving or working in drug or anything, if he was given the chance, maybe he will do something like this. It's also shanty. But gradually, it will be transformed like this. Then he might have a house, a car. This is his original house. Now it is walled. Look at this. And outside the Haran city, this is the original house. Through reunification, gradually they gather materials and they are improving from this to this, gradually over time, rather than paying rent. And you can see the stages of development here very clear. From this to this to this. This is new room coming up. They reuse the elements. This is wooden stock of the art remains, windows, tiles that's supposed to be thrown. Okay. If I'm not peace. Look at this. Now, the revivification, what does revivification does, we talked about yesterday, the people has the right to revive a land, and the land is everywhere. Then to almost zero land value, like you see in these cities. Now, because the land has a value, because there is no revivification, even the agricultural lands were kept to die because the law does not allow the people to transform agricultural lands to residential land to make profit. But they leave it till it died. So then the government says, okay, it's dead far, now we can make it. Now we can make it. Again, the movement of the urban areas on that. Now you can see here in these three stages the growth of the unified form of submission. This is the first property, second, third, this is the first stage. And because the people has the right to revive the land, that right bundled with other rights. Right of discharging water, right of walkway, right, that's civil rights. So the people may have the right to walk to this attracting point. There is hills maybe here, and gradually, through accumulations of decisions of the people, the town or the settlement will grow up. But then some properties may be blocked by the revivification of some others. A new right will emerge, which is the right of access to someone else's property. And that's very much different than our structure today, where we have a central authority, they pave the roads, they plan the streets, open the streets, and so on. And at the end, you have very well organized environment, but somehow controlled, pushing objects to the dispersed form of submission. So our environments now are very well organized, but they are not ordered. That's my argument. They are not ordered because it's elements in the dispersed form of submission. In the traditional environment, although it may not look organized, it is in the unified form of submission. So here, for example, this property has the right to pass through this property to move. This property has the right to pass through this property to move. And the people through action, now let's remember one thing, always the people ask, what the hell are you talking about? The people will compete on the property. So I say, no. The people are gradually increasing in number, not suddenly. Gradually, they are born. So they establish rights by usage. There is a water source here, they come to the water. The walkway they walk in becomes their own rights that cannot be violated by others and cannot be revived by others. So nodes creates rights. This is a node in the market, another node. And you can see here, the city of Northern Africa, that's the pathways on the ground. These are marked pathways that cannot be revived by others. So they are demarcating their rights. You can see here. So if you like, the action of the people individually who are experiencing the site, not like the planner sitting in his office, experiencing the site, practicing the site, gradually their decisions accumulate. I passed from this way, he passed from that way. Well, why he went from that way? I'll try it. No, I don't like it. I'll come from here. A third guy. So there is voting among the people. They are voting on the site to select the right path. Gradually, the right path will be demarcated to define a street or a path. that at the beginning it will be very wide, because it's in the people's interest to make wide streets. This is also from ill-defined, here it's the path is ill-defined, it's not well-defined, the streets are not well-defined, to a quite well-defined, to very, very well-defined. There is maximum number of users. Now, in order to give the people the right to control and to put the public space in the unified form of submission, the question you would ask is, should the people, all the people meet? If somebody wants to build a deck on the street or plant a tree, it's impossible, right? So they have to devise mechanisms where the people collectively could control the street. The mechanism as follows. There's several mechanisms that select three. One of them is that if the street is heavily used, the objection of any individual is considered as objection of everyone. Anybody has the right to object. But if the street is less used, they don't consider the objection of passers-by, they consider the damage. If you dig a well, for example, in the street, they'll ask you, what are you doing? It is damaging the public, or it's narrowing the street. So the principle of damage becomes the reference of accepting or rejecting individuals' contribution to the better environment. The third principle is that, for example, is dead-end streets, some streets within private domains are owned by the residents. In that case, the principle of damage is not counted, but rather the agreement of everybody. Everybody has to agree, whether it's damaging or not, because they are partners in that space. Now, people gradually, through usage, establish rights. Not municipality, not rules. People through usage. If this type of usage, this becomes a right of this person to use the space. This is their right to use this space. His right, their right. Among the interesting things also in this little city is the FINA, which is the spaces abutting your own property on the public domain. That is everybody's right to, that's the owner's right to utilize. So he has the right to stop you from sitting here. That's why you see in the shops in Muslim city, people always push their goods to the street to attract customers. This is their right to display their objects, because public spaces, like rivers or so on, bounded by spaces for the public to utilize. That is their rights. Another FINA, contemporary FINAs from Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Tunis. Now, when one revives a property, he might leave a space as FINA, and he will demarcate that, meaning that one day he will expand, as he expanded here. So they keep expanding till it gets to this situation. So we can move from this to this gradually, from wide streets like this, through additions to narrower streets. But at that time, because they used camels, horses, and so on, their streets were narrow. Those who argue against this principle of revocation, I say, okay, now they use cars. So people going and coming by cars, they will leave the width of the car. And in this case, as you see, They left 80 meters. I asked him, do you think this will be Champs-Élysées one day? Why did you leave this space? He said, well, we don't know. Maybe they discover this is very close to our side. They discover something and our city becomes important. The point is that the people in the site, they are thinking of what could happen in the future. And not as we planners think, no, they don't know anything. No, they don't. So we move gradually from this situation to a pattern that goes with the topography. That's why when we look at the traditional environment, through usage, through passage, and so on, the people demarcate path that really goes logically with the topography. Even the overpasses, because the street was what is left over from the people's education, the overpass area is considered a space that is available for utilization by the people if it does not damage others. So that's why in Muslim cities see so many projections like this. It's not only climatic. Here you see this guy opened the door, window. This neighbor objected that his house would be overlooked by the window. They ordered him to screen the window. So the principle of damage was one of the major damage that really shaped the traditional environment. And what does this principle mean for the unified form of submission, that individuals in the site are free to act as long as they don't damage others. This means that they have maximum control without damaging others. Now these days, you take permission from the authority and you can do whatever in the site. Even sometimes you can damage the environment or the neighbors. But in the traditional environment, you cannot do that because the people around you will stop you if you try to damage the environment. This is Tunis. This is amazingly, this factory, by the permission of the authority, pollutes the whole area because they got permission. The people don't have the right to object. I was living in this compound. Now, what does this principle of damage lead to? Enhancing the quality of the elements in the unified form of submission. How? They invented methods of measuring responsibility. Because if you say damage, everybody says, well, how do you measure damage? What's damaging for me may not be damaging for you. Here, the community will come to solve the problem. If they manage, then they go through several stages, finally to the judge. In this case, his house. This guy transformed his house into a stable. So the horse and the donkey was hitting the wall, and he couldn't sleep, the next neighbor. So he objected. So to discover the damage, they said, okay, let's see, does the wall vibrate or not? They brought 4 threads with the paper in the middle. They put the paper in the middle and tied the walls with these threads. Then they pushed the donkey to hit the wall. And they put in the paper small seeds. And they saw the seeds. Well, is it moving or not? That was the standard that they had. If it moves, then the wall is moving. So this owner objected. They told him to stop the damage. They don't tell him, you cannot have horses in your house. No, you should stop the damage. This will push the society toward inventive solutions, this principle, toward inventive solutions without damaging the environment. So the solution was that he has to build a wall with that thick and dig a ditch with one person's height, so the vibration will go like that. So the vibration will die. This is the donkey, the vibration will die. So it will not go there. Now let's think of the city in this manner. We know, let's say now the Bible says you cannot do this function, you cannot transform your building to this function in this side of the city. This is the law. But if you use the principle of damage, a person may be doing a business in leather, making shoes or whatever. In that side, he knows where are the raw materials, how easy can he bring them, where he will sell them, what's the situation. If he thinks it is because he's the expert that this site is good for that, he will transform his building. The community will say, no, I cannot do that. They will fight the argument in terms of inventions and measuring the damage. This will enhance knowledge of whether utilizing that site or not. If he managed and succeeded, gradually others will follow to that same site. Gradually that site will become a site for carpenters, for smiths, for different functions. That's why when you look at the Muslim city, you find it different industries gathered in certain places out of the experience of the site and the agreements of the people, but not out of laws and regulations. This is, now this led to the concept of possessing damage. Because the system is verification, who came earlier, managed to revive his property, and maybe he had a window that overlooks this side. The next guy, or he has shop, better example. The next guy who comes, he cannot object on the shop. He says, well, there's no commercial street, close the shop. No, he cannot do that, because he can later. So this first property possessed the damage of opening the shop. So he has the right of precedence. He has the right of precedence. And the right of precedence could not be only owned by a property owner, by collectively by a group of people. So if there is, let's say, 10, 20 houses and they have their discharge rainwater going to the valley, the people who come later has to respect that pathway, because it is owned by the first owners. Now, one of my students was saying, what kind of living is this? I have to take care of all those rights and memorize them, and why some others don't take care of it? I said, how much does the municipalities cost us in running the city? Wouldn't it be nice to save that money in medicine or education or entertainment? If you think of it that way, there is no way in organizing the city without central agent, an outsider agent, that the city can be organized by itself, from the people itself, without the right of precedence, without possessing rights. But immediately one thinks that the environment will be chaotic. People will do bizarre things, and it is not. But if you look at the Muslim environment, you see buildings resemble each other. Why? Because there is conventions of making forms. People willingly follow the conventions. I'll explain that now. Now, if we look at the accessibility, the capacity of the space will be enhanced. For example, this block might be transformed to this block, but this one has the right to access there, there, there. And if somebody had a property, he died, then he should have the right to access the street. This is an example where this is a passageway from one property to another in the possessive form of submission or the permissive form of submission. Now, this mentality of pushing objects to the unified form of submission led to this structure, where this is a property. Collectively, and let's say C1 is one dwelling, C2 second dwelling, C3. These collectively may have their own dead end street. And the group of these, this is B2, B1, B3, they have collectively a space like that. And this is A2, A1, A3, collectively they have this space. So the city was organized in a way in terms of responsibility, not necessarily accessibility. Yeah, I noticed in Sweden that you have gates, the numbers enter the gates. So it is territories. But territories in terms of control, not in terms of ownership. Because if you have the right to access, you will access. Accessing doesn't mean that you own what's there. But here, because most objects in the unified form of submission, accessibility mostly means the claim of ownership, and which brings with it control. And there's major difference between both. Because these territories are well defined, we should expect gates. Gates should be very well demarcated. That says this is a sharp line inside and outside. So there is gates always decorated, well defined. This is private, this is public. It should be different when you go inside. One of the fancy elements that is pinned on it only is the gates. So there is large gates for cities. Tunis, Cairo, Marrakesh. And there is gates of villages. This is a gate there, gate there. And there is gates of quarters. This is Tangier, the same picture before and after. There is a gate here, gates of quarters. The gate, this is the gate of quarter. But now there is no gate. The authorities removed the gates. I went to one library at Harvard and looked at the description in Egypt when Napoleon invaded Egypt. They went to the city, to Cairo, to map the city. Amazingly, when you look at the drawing of Cairo, you see black built-up areas. Why? Because there was gates. They couldn't penetrate, so it's all black. Then they demolished the gates when they controlled the city. Most gates, they made big fire in the center of the city and burned on the fire of the gates. For security reasons, to control the city, they have to demolish the gates. So you see the traces of the gates. Sometimes you don't see them, you see the traces of gates. Here there is a dead end street, there is a gate here behind this one, which is this one. When you see this wood with holes, that means there was it. That's what it is. Sidi Musaid, Tunis. Now, what does the gate? What does the mean gate? What's the meaning of the gate? It is the demarcation between my responsibility and my responsibility. And if you remember when we developed the model of responsibility and we said that the unified form of submission is the best possible position of an object, here is, you go inside here to a dead end street between a few properties. Outside is the responsibility of the authority. And you look how it is here and how neatly it is here from the inside. It's like a living room. And those people are poor, very poor. This is in Asila, Morocco. This is in Riyadh. Asila, amazingly clean. This is in Jordan. They clean the streets in specific day, the ladies by themselves. This is in Morocco. This is in Morocco, Jordan.
This is a camp.
Hmm?
A camp in Jordan.
Yes. This is Palestine. Now, when I talk the Islamic City is giving the people more freedom of action, more choices that they should make their own decision. Everybody says that it will be chaotic. Everybody will do something else, something different. No. Willingly, the people follow conventions. Convention is gradually developed and perfected. But an Amoeba convention, I'm sure you all know about it, is that they are all dressed almost the same. It's difficult for one of them to do something different. Unless someone is in quite difficult position and he has to invent something, then they look at that invention. If they like it, they copy it. If they copy it, it becomes convention. So to come up to this level of perfection, Afghanistan, Jeddah, Qatif, Riyadh, let's remember always, look at this Asrir. This is mud. Those people with low technology, with little material, they managed to do this. They managed to do this. Now, it's not right for us as professionals to copy the end product of those societies and bring it to our days. If we have to learn something from the past, we should look at the process that generated those forms, which basically, for me, it's the properties rights and individual rights, crystallized in the form of submission. If you see the people and their condition, this is fantastic. In the rooftop, they move from one roof to another, from one property to another, for ladies. Even they can control the light. This is an opening, they have a mat here. It's a very harsh, hot, sunny. Outside is very, very, very difficult, but look at the inside. How they control light from that openings. Because of conventions. How do you get to conventions? Some people, they make stupid things. This guy used the ceramic in the outdoor. Well, he tried it. If he succeeded, other like it, will copy it. This guy used the interior wallpaper to the outside. Of course, in 3 days it will fall down. But it's not a decision by the municipality that if it went wrong, the whole city went wrong. So trial and error in the smaller scale level could lead to conventions. But the price is very low. This guy used the foil, aluminum foil, and he put it inside to protect himself from heat. Of course, it doesn't work. These guys, the electric so they build around. Give you one example. This brick, small brick, that big. People use it in different places, decoration. You may not like it, but somehow conventions will develop. This is for pigeons. This is a builder in the street. His job is to transform the experience of the society into new buildings. He said, I have some drawing. Show me. This is his drawing. This is a building. He does not invent things. He copy and improve. So the attitude of design is copy and improve rather than be inventive. But we need invention, of course. Now I'll take one element which is covering the street. Some people use this type of wood, some people use this type or other type of wood, this type of cloth to cover the street, this type of cloth. And through experiencing the site, someone say, well, they did it there differently, why don't you do like them? That's better solution than yours. Because each solution is tested on the site. It's not hypothetical. This is another coverage. Now, if we as an architect or professionals, we like our ancestors' production of environments, rather than copying the past that was created with simple techniques, simple materials, with our advancement now in technology, material, properties, and so on. If we followed that process, we will do something really ingenious. But we didn't, as society, have the chance to do that. Look at this mural. Poor people, but look. This is a palace in Qasida. This is Sultan Hassan Mosque, Cairo. It's almost like if you stand here, you wonder how they did it at that time. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamel. I think I have many questions, and maybe like yesterday, I will just start, and then of course we can open up to everyone. So I assigned at least 6 questions, so maybe, or 6 points, that maybe one by one, that we can hope to. But even before that, maybe two comments, and then briefly this 6 points that I would like you to expand a little bit more. The first also that today I also understood a little bit better also your contribution to when this book was out, it was the end of the 80s, and this was the beginning of postmodernism. And I think you made very clear how your position is different toward looking at these traditional environments, not copying forms, but actually being careful about the process. And therefore, I mean, link maybe to that is the first question in relation to that specific positions that you are taking, is that in that sense, where is the role of the architect? Because in the postmodernism, it was about copying forms and continue the same business. So the question in this case would be, if you say the process, what does it mean for an architect as a profession to actually work towards that? This is one first.
Let me answer this question.
Okay.
This is a very, very important question. What is the role of the architect? Now, a lot of people think that I am negating the role of the architect. No, I'm not doing that. Now the architect is often hired, big architects, by banks, by powerful institutions, by the government. They are rarely hired by the people. Maybe in small villas and so on, they're hired by the people. Excuse me, I stand on the side because of the architects. We can turn it over now. It's okay. Maybe it's switched over. Thank you. But if you remember yesterday, when we talked about the 3 essence of life, which is access to resources, access to knowledge, access to permissions, and I argued that there is so much, the percentage of owners is very high. In that situation, where the people are much richer, without much difference between the richest and the poorest, the people will hire the architect. And the architect role is the same. He has to be inventive. under the umbrella of the people who are very close to him, who are observing him. So his role will continue, but under the direct supervision of the people. Now, most government projects are to have hierarchy of responsible people, one on top of the other, and it's not direct. This direct relationship, I argue, would enhance the quality of the projects. Not only that, the architect will know what the people want. A good example is housing, how it failed in the 50s and 40s, because the architect was far away from the people, hired by the government, by the Ministry of Housing. So they produced something that the people didn't like. So the movement of participation by John Bracken, by John Turner, started to emerge in the 60s and the 70s. So his role is, of course, required, because the people does not have the highest possible knowledge of the built environment. Not even that, but a group of donators, hospital, or school, or university, they will hire an architect. But his role will not be a person who decides the fate of the whole city like a planner. Because a planner has to see the future, how it looks like, and he cannot do that. There's no way they can do that. The city is continuously changing. But our cities now, because of the central governments, became so crowded. So we bring the people together, then you want to separate them with planning. But if we followed what I talked yesterday, the settlements will be dispersed on the earth. And people don't have to be crowded. So the role of the planner will be different at that time. Because group of settlers will bring the planner to plan their settlement, like a person who hired an architect to plan for him his house. So the role of the professional is always under the direct supervision of those who own control it, but not decision makers for us. So the people who are subjected to the planner that they hired him, they will debate each decision they did with him. He says, okay, I want this street. He says, no, you can't do that. You want this playground. Their wish, he tried to bring their wishes into reality.
Yeah, can I a bit follow on Alessandro's on the role of architects and what, one of the things when we began our own practice and we went to refugee camps, we were completely confused of what, first of all, we were not asked to go there. We just, entered refugee camp and we thought that architecture is absolutely important while refugees for the right of return was thinking that architecture here is the enemy, that we should not build because we need to come back home. But nevertheless, the whole condition, we thought we want to go there as architects and understand what is our position. And from one side, maybe as architects, we decided we don't want to work with the ones that have the power, because matter of fact, either you are a friend of the mayor or you have a rich father and have good friends to commission your work. This is the way architecture, at least in our days, is done. So you need to be nearby the control, nearby the power in order to be an architect. And we thought we would like to create for ourselves a different path. And intuitively, we went to the camp, we understood that the only way we can do it is that by creating knowledge. So we established the university in a very intuitive way. We thought we cannot work here as architects without producing knowledge. So in that sense, we began to build a common language with the people in order then for us to understand how can we do architecture with them. And slowly, after doing the university, we began to think, okay, how can we understand this knowledge in the built-up environment? And we made our way inside. So I'm trying to answer Alessandro that in that sense, there is a huge role for the architects in terms of, first of all, sort of creating knowledge around what a built environment is and being creative to sort of propose things that normally people would not have think about, and this would, but in the same time, it should be an interpretation of what is happening rather than, I come there and say, this is what I propose you as architect. So I don't know, I feel that it's also a bit clarifying something that we were all the time confused about. What does it mean to be the architects of refugee camp? Why do I need to go in a refugee camp and think about architecture, right? And maybe refugee camps now in a place like the Middle East, they are the only ones that were still people practicing what you are pointed at, because it's in a sense, you know, the ownership, they have a bit of this formula of the unified, I mean, when we were looking as architects, and maybe now I have much more things clarified, is that maybe the only places that remain in the Middle East with people controlling and have ownership on their own environment are these places carved outside of the state. And in a sense, I think that there is a lot there to see and understand. And me either, I mean, I have 15 questions. I know that we cannot have time to have 15 questions, but we will follow up question by question. I don't know, I can stay here forever.
Okay, but just to clarify that we should remember always that those refugees are quite poor and so on because they didn't have the access to it. What you said is right, but if those refugees had access to the resources and knowledge and permissions, it would be a very, very different story. They would be much, much more capable. Okay, next question.
Yeah, the next one, I think has to do with the urbanization and time, because I think what is very convincing, you know, when you describe the very organic growth of city, historical cities, you know, one can totally be convinced by the argument. However, let's say if one to take even the example of Cairo, you know, Cairo passed from that kind of growth in which people had the time to negotiate, had the time to improve, had the time to test, in a city that's become like 100 times how it was before in maybe 30 years. The impact, you know, this is true for Cairo, it's true for, you know, cities in China, it's true for Sao Paulo, it's true for so many cities. I think the magnitude of urbanization, in a way, it contributes to wipe out completely any possibility, you know, that kind of, because also you rightly said, you know, this needs time. It's time for people even to form the community. In some cases, you know, people just get together, not knowing each other, and being there. And this is, let's say, one strong component that, in a way, undermine completely that kind of organic growth. Even in this contest here in the 70s, just few decades ago, Swedish were very people. The center you see here now, and it was completely different. And they had to build 1 million houses in just few years. The impact of that is something somehow that challenged the very idea of how one could think still that the city can grow in such beautiful organic way. Meanwhile, the magnitude of the change is something that maybe humanity never actually witnessed. So therefore, the model there, I see that there is a challenge in relation to speed, if you like. One, to speed, but the other elements I also thought in relation to the time and temporariness. These are people are staying, you know, let's say now maybe more than ever before, and maybe we are also ready. The example of it, you know, we are already living for some period in one place, for another period in another place. You yourself now to move to Istanbul, and this again affects our possibility of influencing the environment in a very material terms, because, you know, we are there in these transitory conditions, and therefore both because of the time in a way force us to be much less, it's much more difficult somehow to think as people were thinking about generations. When people were building, as also we did in Palestine, we built our own house on the rooftop where Sandy's father built his own. So we were somehow continuing that. But I cannot think about now building the same for my two daughters because I have no idea that they might be or might not be there. So I think that also is the other elements that I think, together with urbanization, it's also really deeply challenged in a way the possibility to have that such important and convincing urbanic growth. So I was just wondering how in your reflections and in your model, I mean, you take into this account these dimensions.
I think this is very, very important. That megacities that was raised yesterday, and how these cities attract people. And my answer was that because of accessibility to the three essentials of life: resources, knowledge, and permissions, is not permitted for the people. We have these megacities now. Villages are lived by its own inhabitants. People migrate to Cairo, Casablanca, Damascus, looking for better life. Because the state controls everything. Nobody can take any resources without the permission of the state. And the state gives the permission to certain people over others. So the wealth and wealth makers are all in the city. Jobs are in the major cities, especially capitals. So people are drawn there. So the problem is not that the earth is not sufficient for the people, 7 billion, but the problem is that the administrative structure that put the people in one place needed the planner to solve the problem that was created by the structure, by the administrative structure. But if the people had the access to resources, these cities in the outset will not appear. They will not exist. Yesterday I showed a slide, but I couldn't explain it. It went, and when I said that I spent some time trying to understand what's the percentage of the people are really producing things in the United States, for example, or any country. When I say produce things, doing things, camera, microphone, chair, pen, chair, producing things, or services, medicine, education. Let's say we have 2 settlements. In one settlement, let's say both settlements have 1,000 people. In this settlement, everybody is working because there is convention of production and producing goods. The 1,000 people, if they work 4 hours a day, the total production is 4,000 hours a day. In the other settlement, where 40 or 50% sometimes of the workforce is went into bureaucracy. I gave the example of the Ministry of Agriculture. They don't produce a single lemon. Huge ministry. They only generate paperwork to control the people. If you look at the profession, most professions like that, 40 to 50%, if you count retirement and 50 to 40% of the manpower is not producing except organization. In your life, you rarely meet somebody who's working in a factory or doing real job. No, he's managing something. In that case, 50%, let's say, the people has to work 8 hours to be like the city that produces 100%. So we have so many hours waste in managing those cities, bringing materials for them to live. These are parasite cities, living on other cities. So the problem is initially one of accessibility to these 3 essentials that created these cities, that they shouldn't be there in the outset. Some cities, because of their geographical situation, like New York, Istanbul, for commerce or whatever, can expand, but not to this level, where the government, everything now is in the capital or in major cities, the universities, the hospitals. People always has to try to travel to the major cities, especially in third world countries. To finish, you want to take a passport, you have to go to the capital city. You like the lights at night, you stay in the city. You think of migrating to the city. The Arab Spring started when the one guy, he burned himself. In a town that produces phosphate that is sold and all the money goes to the capital. That does not produce much. While the people who are producing are not reaping the benefit of their work. But if that city where this guy, mostly burned himself, was well infrastructure, because the people have the resources, and the people will pay for the resources through private companies or whatever. We discussed this yesterday. Then there will be no migration to these major cities. So we created a problem. Now we want to solve that problem. That's my answer.
Can I don't know, maybe we are taking a lot of, if there are other questions, go ahead, but I wanted to follow up on this, if possible, with the practical example, because maybe this would be super helpful. I mean, when I was working in the Haitian camp, when I was working in the Haitian as a head of the Department of the Planning, basically in UNRWA, in the UN, that they sort of managed to have a piece of land around the camp. And one of the decisions that was taken, let's divide the lands, small lands for each one, and give it to the people. And sort of, they do a program called self-help program, which means that you help yourself. It's not that UNRWA will help you. And they figured this out because they say the 5,000 that I will be building as a structure, I will be building one mall. With the 5,000, people will be building 2 bedrooms apartment, right? So they sort of made it completely economy. But then when they gave people, you know, they were like 50 to 60 families, they gave them pieces of land and they gave them the $5,000 each, that UNRWA would not have been able to do nothing with it. And by this, the place flourished because they went together. They began to decide together what to do. With this 5,000, somebody asked the family for other 3,000. And the whole place, I mean, UNRWA was completely shocked on how can we, with only this and only this budget, doing that thing? So, I mean, it's not completely abstract and out of, I think that if we look at some examples where some weak governments, like the one of UNRWA, that don't have money and cannot impose control, I mean, they were obliged to go there. I think that this would help us understanding much better what you are proposing.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
In other contexts, many times the resources are not necessarily in the hands of the government, but in the hands of the private. The problem is in only a few people. So my question is, how would you suggest to make a change in the sense that we can have a permission, we can trust that people can develop a knowledge, but the resources, how can you start redistributing resources when they're on the hands of only a few?
Yeah, this is interesting question. But you see, when she asked the question, few has the resources. We often do that. We think as capitalists in a capitalist society, few will not have the resources in their hands if we open the door for the people. Let's say that you have an oil company.
But it's a reality, I mean.
It is a reality. How do we move out?
Yes.
That's what I'm explaining. Let's say that you have an oil company and you have workers working for you. If we open the door for people to extract oil by themselves, why do they work for you? They will bring other people collectively. They have the knowledge because they're working for you. They bring others to participate with them in shares. And gradually you have to sell your company or you have to pay them much higher money to work for you. Ultimately, they will become partners. Gradually, the structure will change into partnership rather than one person employing others. Because people, if you open doors for them, knowledge, resources, and permissions, one person can be much richer than other, but 5 times, because he's smarter 5 times, 10 times. But not 1 billion times like me and Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a nice guy. He's donating, but others are not. And they are the one consuming, remember yesterday, consuming and polluting the environment because the unemployed are forced to work for them because they have no right to work. They have no place to work. So gradually this system will be dismantled because the people will move away from those who are hiring them with low prices. We move away to others. Just open the door for them. And the settlements will be where the goods under the ground is. So you don't have to transform goods, food, sewage, and so on from one place to other. Like Cairo, everything comes to Cairo to feed Cairo, but they don't produce anything except bureaucracy. Sisi got 500 billion. It could have changed Egypt. Where did it? Nothing. This is our problem with the bureaucracy.
Yes, but the problem, I mean, saying just open the door, I think that's because having all the resources, you have all the power also. Like how?
I know I realize it's difficult to accept, but you in the Western culture, exactly in your constitutions, the people have the power. So if that constitution somehow was changed and the people accepted this concept, that why do you stop me from taking the resources? For example, a country like Brazil that produces wood, for example, people should have the right to cut trees, but plant trees instead, in order not to damage the environment. In that case, when the people get richer and manpower becomes expensive, moving a wood from one place to another becomes expensive, and that helps sustainability. Now, in third world countries, you buy a refrigerator, it comes with nicely packed wooden box. The wooden box costs maybe as much as the refrigerator in terms of substance to the earth, sustainability. But it's cheap because labor is cheap. Labor is cheap because people are unemployed. People are unemployed because these three doors are closed against them. So it is not sustainable. That's why yesterday I was arguing we can never have sustainable development within our current structure of economy. This is impossible for me.
Can I ask you to imagine something? No, I was, while he was speaking, I was imagining, imagine if by policy, only speaking about policy, that the Swedish government would decide, instead of building housing for refugees, to say, we give you, each one of you, a piece of land of 60 meters square, whatsoever. I mean, a piece of land that would be okay for building 2 rooms apartment, each one of them, and giving them the possibility to do whatever they want. So they will take away the permission and they give them a piece of land. I can tell you that this piece of city would become completely complementary, amazing place. They might create a piece of Syria there or a piece of Palestine there that everybody wants to go. So they would begin to compete with what is the center of Sweden, because they would create their own center. It would be an amazing place. So it's enough that a mayor of Stockholm would come and say, I want to give these refugees that are arriving a big piece of land and let them build whatever they want. Enough. And I can tell you that we cannot even imagine what might be happening. So we are not saying, destroy everything, but begin from policies to say, what can I do in order? Since we arrived to Sweden, we are struggling of understanding how it is ever possible to build a house or something small with our friends that we can feel belonging to. It's impossible. Impossible. We were discussing with Peter, everybody, and we are even architects, privileged people, teachers in the university. And if all this, they are not even able to build their own small, tiny community, then we are all obliged to live with what they decided for us to live in, and we accept it. I think that what this conference is trying to say, why do we accept all this? Why I would accept not to live in my house together with my friends? Why? Who is obliging me? And policies might be. Anner was showed that it's possible to do that. The mayor of Stockholm might be doing something completely revolutionary if he would like to. But this is the point, that we are not dismantling now the whole Mac company or whatsoever. We begin to show that this is possible if there is a will for it to happen, I believe. So it's,
But why is it not possible to buy a piece of land and do something? What are the difficulties that you find?
I mean, what we are facing now is we have also some architects that work since a while here, and they say, first of all, it's quite hard to understand how you get permissions because it's all built by super big companies. So in that sense, you would get inside a system where basically only super strong companies are competing. So we are obliged to compete with something that we are not able to compete with. So we even don't know how it is ever possible to do it. Now, this was a dream since the beginning, and we are realizing more and more that it's basically super hard to do what we did in Palestine in a place like Stockholm. I mean, it's not possible. We are now thinking of alternatives, but I don't think that it's so easy just to they say that there are some cases that happened in Stockholm where people took together a piece of land and they invited us to go and see it as if it is the super rare thing that is happening in the city. But I mean, it's not usual. So you need to go completely against what the city is all about. So it's yeah. I mean, this is at least our experience.
Question?
If nobody have questions, I have.
First, maybe if there are. Meanwhile, you think, just a brief question, meanwhile they think about all the questions. Because I didn't find in the book and also in the talk today any description or reflections about this form of land that for us was very inspiring in terms of traditions, but also conceptually, which is the al-mashar that still exists in Palestine. And for us was coming maybe also from the reflection in the camp, in which you don't have the public and the private, and somehow the idea of that can be translated as a common, but it's not, which is the al-mashar. It was a way for us to think a form of which people collectively own the land together and use the land together. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the notion of al-mashar. Is it also in your model where ownership, use, and control, where al-mashar is located in that model?
Now, for those who don't know al-mashar, mashar means ownership that is collectively owned by people where you don't know exactly where is your part. So the dead end street is mashar, that group of people know it, that's their own. A farm could be a mashar for horses of this tribe to eat from it, and so on. So it's an area for the benefit of a group of people that are well known. And there is a debate. Do they own it or they don't own it? Because in the traditional environment, conventionally, let's say the area between two mountains is their mashar. But legally, since it is not built, it's not utilized by the factory or anything, it's not theirs. So they cannot stop others from coming to it. So there is very settled, well-defined rights for the people of accessibility to this mashar. It can only people, only if they own it. If they inherit it from their ancestors and this is ours. Now some governments recognize that as mashar, like having in Jordan, for example, could say, gave the areas around some mountains to certain families that they claim that is theirs. They sold it, they became rich. But religiously, it's not theirs, because there is no trace of building or urbanization in it. If there is a building or a factory, then it is theirs. Now, what this al-Mashah do is that brings together the people to take care of that site. If you think at the built environment as composed of mashahs, then the public domain of the city or of the settlement will be diminished. So the cost of maintaining it by the government will be less and less. So most likely, if they own it and they have traces of elements in it and so on, it is in the unified form of submission. But if the government develop regulations for al-Mashah, you can do this, you cannot do that, you cannot dig water well, then they don't have control of it, so it is in the trusteeship form of submission. So it can take different forms. But what's interesting about al-Mashah is that in the traditional environment there is only two types of properties. Little for the government, very little. And the majority, 99% of the land is in the unified form of submission, supposedly. But the size of party is different. It can be one person, it can be both persons. Even the streets are pushed into the unified form of submission. Now, our days in the Middle East, and I assume everywhere, there is three types of properties. The private, where the people own, the government ownership, and the ownership of the public that the government controls. The government can direct people what can be invested in and what is not. So the access to transform properties from mashah or mashah of the public or the government to the private domain is very weak. That's why in our days now we rarely see unified form of submission. If I understand very well, you rarely find in this place unified form of submission. It's either permissive or trusteeship. You rarely find that. And my argument is always, the more unified form of submission there is, the more knowledge will be enhanced. Environmental knowledge will be enhanced. The healthier is the environment. But if you have less unified form of submission, people don't seek knowledge, people wait for the professionals to take care of the environment. So environmental knowledge will be in the hands of little people, although they're experts, but it will not develop as far as if it's mostly in the unified form of submission. Just for clarification for the guys who came late, unified form of submission is a situation where one party owns, control, and use.
One
party owns, control, and use. Dispersed form of submission, three parties share the responsibility of an object. Like housing project, the government own it, Ministry of Housing control it, public use it, or the residents use it.
Yeah.
Between these two extremes, there is three forms. I can explain it later if you like.
Yeah, I mean, my question here, what I am struggling with, I follow you in everything unless from my own experience, what happened when, for example, a young generation would like to do something and the old generation would oppose it because of the fact that they are traditionally into something. This is the only, so I can tell you one example that explains, in the camp where we are working, there was left by all senses only 3 shelters from the 50s, which will also describe what the camp was about and the life of the camp. So a group of people with whom we worked, the young generation, decided to come together and say, why don't we save this place? I mean, this is part of our history. It would be amazing for us to still be having this place. And they proposed as young generation to save this place. They went to first they went also to the sort of people that are helping into managing the place, because this system would create also some leaders, more leaders, less leaders, people that are, as you said, not helping into conflict resolutions and everything. So first they went there and they got their acceptance, their blessing. So like, fine, go and speak with the guy. They would go and speak with the guy, and the guy decided, no, I mean, I'm not happy to keep these 3 shelters, and instead they sort of make it quicker the day after we wake up. And these for a while he was threatening that he will destroy it. But at this point, the community decided to stand nearby him and not nearby the young generation, but for one only reason, because they want to keep this unified model that you are speaking about. And why that? They say, if we will permit one precedent of stopping a man owning this land to do whatever he wants, then we create a precedent in the camp, and therefore we don't save history, we don't save heritage, we destroy it. And they destroyed, and there was a big disappointment among young generation, and they felt a bit betrayed by this sort of way of balancing everything. And I would say that for me, the most challenging thing, and this happened again with the women in Fawar refugee camp, that they want to have their own sort of plaza, and the others were against it. And so that sometimes when there are certain people that have less voice within the community, such model might be oppressive. So I'm asking you, what is your opinion on this?
Yeah, if you remember, I said there's 10 people and one lady. That's what's happening now, the comparison between different elements in different situations. Now, if I understand you correctly, that there is a gap of generations, and the new generations want something that the previous generation didn't like. Let's look at this room. This is in the unified form of submission, right? When we say unified, do we mean the chairs or the walls? The walls. Maybe if it's in the unified form of submission, we as collectively, as one group, we own, control, and use it. But the chairs, I may own this chair, you own your chair, everybody owns this chair. So each chair is different. Now, if we are different generations, and I want, you say, okay, I'm older, you are younger, and you want to reserve that chair, I said, no, I don't want. Something comes here which is justice. If people are stripped of their rights of doing whatever they want, and justice was away, somebody's voice was imposed over others, because there is no justice, maybe what that person is doing that we don't like, and we not give him the permission, gradually over time, this model of thinking will lead, as I argue, to a, I don't say disaster situations, but not as if we kept justice. If the person had the right to do whatever in his property as long as he does not damage others, he can carve out his own responsible area. In that case, you explained a camp. In the camp, there is walls, there is ground, there is boundaries, there is properties. We can only judge, we say, well, this house is in the unified form of submission. It's the ownership of this person. Now, if others want him to preserve that on the expense, let's say, the movement of restoration or of preservation. In England, for example, many properties are under the code of preservation. So you have to have permissions to change something in the facade, because the facade is considered public good that the people should enjoy. And you cannot change things in it without permission. That facade is not under the control of the owner. And that would freeze the elevation as it is for a long time if there is more and more regulation to keep it as it is. Now, is this healthy or not? That would generate a debate, whether the public would like that or not. But is that wall the ownership of the public? If the city agreed, now each society could have its own method of solving the thing. But my argument is that if the central authority has the right to stop all kinds of changes, that might damage the environment. For restorationists, no, it is healthy to bring more tourists. So the argument will not stop unless the society collectively, if they consider this work as collective ownership, they decide about the fate of that work. In a camp, if a house, the owner refused to, I didn't understand the situation very well, but if, let's say that the house is owned by someone and he wanted to demolish it, and the young guy said, no, I cannot demolish it, it is our heritage.
Yeah, this was exactly what was
I think his right, it's his right to do it. Why? Because if he did, he only made the decision to demolish it because he knows if he demolish it, he will make more money to do something else for him. So he built himself as a person. So if the system does not allow the people, each individual, to build himself as a person, and he may spend his life because he could not sell his property or rebuild it something else, he may be broke, he may and so on, it will affect his future. But if we accept that, although we are losing in the heritage, but gradually he becomes healthier, he's healthier, a new convention will emerge, or maybe the people become richer and will salvage the other properties that are has higher ranking heritage because they will buy it and they will keep it. That's why when we look at the traditional environment, we see it is quite constant in its shape because the people are rich. And if somebody wants to change his property, he will change it within the conventions that are there. And because he's capable. You rarely see, tomorrow I'll show examples how the people try to preserve their heritage by reusing the building in some other functions. So justice is the main thing to develop healthy people who can contribute to a better environment. The minute we open the door for unjust activities against one person, it can be reused again and again and again, and the whole healthy movement of the society will be halted. That's my opinion. But tomorrow I hope you raise this question because in the lecture you'll see design-wise how the people can reuse. And this is one of the interesting things about the traditional environment. If you look at the traditional environment, you will notice that it's composed of spaces of similar sizes that when they work together, they give you different usage, different functions. Now, no, the architect, when he designs, he has all the space in his pocket. I need big room, okay, this is big room. I need small room, this is small room. Gradually, you have a building that's composed of all types of rooms. It works very well for that specific function, but then for other functions, you have to do much demolishing to fit the new function. And that's not the situation within the traditional fabric, because they had some kind of wisdom. They don't want to use much materials to reuse the building later in the future. We'll explain this tomorrow.
Yeah. I have other questions if others don't have it, but I know when I'm speaking alone, so I'm giving first the audience the right.
I have one.
Yeah.
Okay, she has one.
Because I feel a bit uncomfortable with this unified mode and the dispersed mode. And if I understood right, you're proposing that the unified mode works really well and the dispersed mode is not really working. And I think my question is if you are kind of proposing that then the dispersed mode should then become unified mode. So if you're proposing this change, why not then propose a change that people take responsibility even if they don't own the property or even if they don't use or control. And if this responsibility is not like towards maybe an object, but you talk a lot about sustainability and the planet, and the person then takes responsibility in like wider view that this should responsibility towards the planet. Because even if I don't own the chair, doesn't mean that I need to destroy the chair because the chair was like resource to use it. And then if I destroy the chair, I'm also then thinking that the share will then need to be remated and you use resource. So like it's not maybe a responsibility very focused in it's mine or it's not mine, but even if it's not mine, it's mine in a way because it's comes from the planet that we all live.
Well, the question I think is revolving around the concept of how do we push elements, properties to the unified form solution. If the argument is that unified form solution is always the best, then how do we push that as a society? How we push elements toward that condition? If I understand the question correctly. Let me give an example. Now let's say in this institute that chairs are used, or drawing tables. I don't know how now you have computers. At that time we have to make models, we have to cut on the tables the models and so on. And in 1 year time, the tables will be misused because we are cutting on the tables. Now, if you give each student the table the minute he enters the college and says, "This is yours," you move it around with you, at the end you have to submit it back to us. But don't damage it. Students may start behaving differently to keep that table as good as possible. So the student does not own the table, but we push the table to the uniform form of submission because he uses it, he controls it. He does not control is something else. But he temporarily acting as owner. Because controlling the table means he has the right to paint it, he has the right to make 5 legs, because maybe he wants to sleep, he might add a leg in the center, structurally, and so on. Students who do not control it, but rather use it and temporarily own it. We should expect the tables in the institute to live longer. Because some students are careless, maybe they misuse the table. The same argument goes for most objects. The streets, for example, if you tell the residents of a street that you have the right to stop any action that you don't like. If the traffic department want to construct a lighting column for traffic, maybe an elderly man would stop and say, "No, I cannot do that." A blind guy says, "I can hinder my way." Now, a debate will emerge here between you need that light there for traffic or not because of an old man. A solution will come. They will install maybe this light traffic on the wall. Think of it this way. Because it's centrally done, all our streets are lit by cables running in the streets, columns standing on the streets to light the streets. How much does that cost? You have the same lights everywhere. It's boring. What happened if we said to the people, you light the street from your own. Do it the way you like. Somebody do it like this, some do it like that, some from ceramics, some from metal. So gradually conventions will develop for the best possible lighting of that specific area of the street with no cost. Just a wire from the person's house, and he puts little cost and becomes enjoyable because they are providing a service to others. That's totally different than how much does it cost in the city, because it's done by the central government. Simply the task of lighting the street was distributed on the inhabitants. But let's remember always, and inhabitants now, they don't want to do it because they are weak. They are poor. They don't have access to knowledge, resources, and permissions. But if they have, and let's not forget that the market, as explained yesterday, now is filled with complementary objects that push people to consume more. But if the people had access to resources, they will be close to their income. The industry will react by producing needed objects and essential objects, but not complementary objects. In that case, there is no desire to consume much. Therefore, they have more money to expend on others, on their properties, develop their properties, like their streets, clean their streets, and they don't have to clean it by themselves, because there are big companies to clean their streets for them if they want. But they are supervising the companies, not someone else sitting somewhere and don't know what's happening in the street.
But building on what Tatiana was saying, for example, if I go here to nature and I don't own that piece of land, I don't control, and I'm using it temporarily. And I won't throw my garbage just there, even though it's not going to affect me, you know? And I would like to think that I'm not taking care of things just because I own it, you know? Like having like another conscious in relation to generations, like as Tatiana was saying, like we own...
It's too much.
we all live in the same planet, you know, like, and not because I own it, I will take care of it, you know, like having like another conscious. I kind of agree with what you're saying, but I think it's a bit sad to think that we only take care of things when we own it and we control it.
Yeah, let me explain. I didn't say that we only take care of things when we own it. No.
No, but
Most likely we take care of things that we own most. But if things are in the platform of submission and we take care of things that we own, gradually this becomes a habit. And the convention of the society of most people and their behavior becomes automatically a type of where people take care of everything. So that our conventions will change. That's why now you see, I showed you that example in Bangladesh, where the guy is in the street. What happened? Because simply the state assumed control, but couldn't control. And the people are somehow negligent because they didn't have something to own. So they're always negligent. Because that behavior is not there. Plus, you said somebody goes to the jungle and he maybe create a fire or something because he doesn't own the space. That's happening now. Once I was sitting in Algeria and somebody was arguing with me, their football team won a game and the guys were shouting in the street and it was very noisy. He said, how do you stop this if it wasn't a unified form of submission? I said, did the government stop it now? It's happening. It is happening. But if the people had the power, they would stop it. Because of making noise. But because they don't have the power. The same thing, somebody responded at one of the Syrian guys in Istanbul. He said, look what's happening in these places. When you let people do whatever they want, they transform some streets into Wednesday market. They spread everything and the residents in the street are in discomfort. What do? He said, because the people don't have control. If you have control, you stop the people from selling things in the market. Because they do not have control, the state has control. This happened. If the people has control, you have a soldier in every next to every single object. If the traffic lights are owned by the people in the street, anybody misuse the traffic light, the passersby will stop it because this is mine. But now it's all right, it's for the state.
What does that mean when you say somebody points at a traffic light and says, that's mine? What exactly does that mean in a kind of literal sense?
Now, if the city, now we're thinking of mega cities, where people are drawn into the cities to live in the city. What I'm arguing about is that if the people have accessibility to resources, knowledge and so on, the settlements will be where the goods under the ground is or overground is. So the cities will not be as dense. In that case, where the people are closing their income, and that they would solve their traffic problem, they will hire a company to solve their traffic problems by constructing, let's say, traffic lights. or something.
The people.
The people.
And how,
So it is
how
from
would they,
their own income.
correct. But how would they hire a company? Like they would have to agree, they would have to meet and then hire a company? I'm sorry, I missed the beginning part of your talk, and I think I missed an important concept with the uniform mode and dispersed mode of submission. The reason I'm asking these questions is because as an outsider coming, both as an outsider to this culture and an outsider to this class, many of the points you're bringing up really start to remind me of kind of the enlightened welfare state, and I'd like to actually start to refer to the things that you were talking about that I find, and referring to Peter talking about, very interesting, about being allowed to do certain things and finding ways to do those things. So I see kind of two sides of the argument. I see, kind of many things about kind of a benevolent state, or kind of a trust between the people who make their own decisions and the state that actually, takes care of its citizens in a kind of very abstract sense, right? And then these kinds of other things happening where it's not possible to take certain initiatives because the people, quote unquote, need to be satisfied as a whole, right? Or certain people have voices and certain people don't in certain situations. So I'm just curious if you could speak to that.
Yes. This point was raised by Jamel yesterday. He used the example, not Western state, he used the example of neoliberalism. That neoliberalism was where the people, it's called where more wealth should be in the hands of the people and not the state and the service and so on and so forth. What I'm calling for is not a welfare state.
Okay.
We are raised in societies that always thinking of the state providing something for the public.
Yes.
What I'm calling for is that if the people had accessibility to resources, people can take resources without permission. If people can build factories, farms, productive institutions without permission, what will happen then? The environment will be far more sustainable than now. Because there will not be a class of people who will organize the society and will consume.
Right.
Let's take the factory, for example. Now, in China, you may take permission to build a factory, and the factory might damage the environment, but they have permission. But if they can act without permission, and the people have resources, there will be no factory. The workers are not the owners. Now, most factories, the investors are different than the workers. In that case, if the mode of production will be the people collectively working together who own the factory. They will not damage themselves in the factory. Why? Because they are the ones to be damaged at the outset. If we think of this way, the environment of this way, when it's composed of all people are participating in these goods, there is no bureaucracy, conventions become an important tool to organize production, to organize people, and so forth. Now I come back to your example of the traffic light. Settlements will be with less people, dispersed on the earth, and the people living there, they want to organize themselves. They want to have the highest tech possible solutions for their traffic, and they agree to bring a company to represent them. Now, how do they gather together? That's very difficult, of course. They may agree to select someone to represent them. But that one always knows he's under the umbrella of the people that he's representing. They're paying his salary. He will bring someone to company or whatever. But this is not privatization.
Right.
Privatization means the government gives the right of selling telephone lines or electricity to a company.
Right.
And you have only one line of cables of a company for that specific street. But if the people on the street or control it, they will look for the better services. And they will bring 2-3 competing companies maybe. And the structure of knowledge of producing services will be different.
Yeah.
Now you have a meter inside each house to check how many electricity you consume. At that time it will be different.
Yeah.
Maybe the community will decide to have 1 meter of using sewage or whatever,
Yeah.
and not necessarily the city at large. In that case, the people who are using, let's say, electricity to light their streets, they might have a meter. In that case, the meter is a bit expensive. They will reduce using maybe electricity and so on. So
Right, right. So again, forgive me if I'm repeating something that's already been discussed. So are you calling for no government or a new kind of government or new political system that maybe we haven't come up with an ideal kind of framework within which everyone lives and becomes self-fulfilled?
We cannot ignore the role of the government, but what I was calling for is that a government that has one basic role, which if people disagree among each other, the ruling institution, the judge or whatever, will intervene to resolve the dispute. But most likely the people gradually will. The book title is Scissoring Right.
Yes, I will.
Scissoring right, it's in Arabic, unfortunately. Scissoring right means how do we cut rights among people?
Yeah.
Let me give an example. Now the rights, when the planners decide the height of buildings, they say this area 2 stories, this area 3 stories, and so on. So all people are alike. If the people, as the principle of relocation is implemented, the first guy 2 stories, next guy maybe 3, fifth guy want to make it 5, they will stop. And because they have control. If we think this way, we control the density of the city. But now, because a powerful guy has a connection with the mayor or so on, he will make 20, 30 story building. Now, when he makes 20 story building because of his relationship, later in the future, we have to change the electric cables because that building consumes more power, telephone lines, everything has to change. In the traditional system, now, if that happened, then you have to widen the streets. You have to take the properties of those by force, eminent domain. You make the street wider, more buildings has to come in the center. But if the person had the right to say, no, I will not give you my property if you want to take it, the street will be remade, and the center of the city will be in the size or the level that it can produce services. New centers will come. And this leads to sustainability because we don't have to replace the electric wires and the sewage system and so on.
I think that's really compelling to think about. I start to think about these kinds of things already happening on a smaller scale in terms of objects and artifacts and like sharing economies. I'm sure this was already discussed yesterday too. So,
Well, I think that my basic argument was that yesterday, that when we look at the manufactured goods or goods that we consume, there are 3. Necessities, needed, complementary. And objects could be necessity or complementary different cultures. In the Gulf region, the car is necessity, here it is complementary and so on. Now, if the people had the power and access to resources, the people will be close in their income, and the market will respond by producing highest possible quality materials. In that case, the environment will not be polluted because consumption will be less. But now, because we have some large number of people are denied access to resources, they are unemployed, and we have this class that tells others what to do and invest. This led to unsustainable environment.
Why do you think that class exists? Why do you think that class exists?
Monopoly.
Those people.
Monopoly.
Monopoly.
They are not smarter or monopoly. Simply because you cannot have You cannot import, let's say, in some countries, Mercedes car till you go through the dealer.
Don't you think that some people are more interested in short-term results rather than long-term benefits? And that's part of the reason that there are these kinds of inequalities or injustices? I'm just curious.
Can you give an example of short-term, long-term?
Yeah, people who say that there's no, climate change because they're making a big profit off of drilling oil in North Dakota, and they don't really care because they're not going to live past, a certain time.
So you go again. You are thinking in the capitalist mode because those guys who decide to finish, those guys who decide to.
Okay.
Make these pipelines, they manage to do that because they are monopolizing others. But if the door is open for others, these guys will not exist in the first place.
Okay, I guess that's why I was asking what is the alternative to capitalism or socialism or the welfare state or communism, because we all know that communism failed. So I'm really interested in this subject. At a macro scale, maybe a more macro scale.
Yesterday I talked about Harvey, about Rifkins and so on. And if you look at them, they all don't have good things. They don't have solutions.
Yeah, that's true.
They dislike what's happening.
Yeah.
What I'm arguing about is that there will be no solutions except giving the people the access. When you give them the access, they become richer. We will consume less because the market will react with productions that are with less complementary materials. Plus, we don't have to move goods from one place to other. You import everything to Cairo, to Riyadh, Stockholm. At that time, goods are in their own locations, except iPhones. You have to import iPhones. Even there, because of the accessibility of knowledge. Knowledge is owned by.
I understand. No, I just have a lot of things to think about. And I don't want to take up. But there's a whole idea of progress. There's this kind of, just as you're saying, the capitalist state of mind. There's a whole kind of concept or belief system in progress that this has driven so much of the way we live, and I'm just thinking about those things, what that might mean.
So may I just maybe finish here for today? I think it's nice how maybe every day is building up more and more. So everyone is invited also to join tomorrow. I think because tomorrow also, I guess we will scale up the discussion also, maybe also to the micro level. And thank you once again, because also today you had another very important element. So looking forward to tomorrow.
Thank you.